Hello, friends. My name is Vanessa Gomez, and I talk about God, sobriety, culture, life, and what it takes to actually wake up in our own lives. As Mark Houston said, most of us are asleep, dreaming we're awake. Something that's been on my mind is about everything in the United States being so divided. This is more kind of the way that we approach politics as a whole. And anything that I'm saying here is not anything that hasn't been said before, but I think it bears repeating. I feel like the next stage of our country is not going to be choosing the correct side. It's going to be integrating with people who do not agree with us. We will need to find a way to work together, to collaborate together, to commune together, to build with each other, regardless of our political and religious ideologies. Not because this is like an easy ask and this is just something that we've been fully capable of doing forever and now is just a good time to do it, but because we're going to need it for survival, actually. We're going to need it for the next phase of being humans together and being spiritual beings on this earth together. And on an individual basis, I just know I personally am burnt out by trying to understand and keep up with who's a good guy, who's a bad guy, where do I want to stand on this, how loud do I want to be about it. I think that it's a sign of spiritual maturity to understand that regardless of political ideologies, it is actually more important that we see the very fundamental human. It's important for our survival and for our sanity. Politics in this country and around the world, quite honestly, but I haven't lived in other parts of the world. So I'm just going to talk about the United States for now. And you can go as far as saying, even in state and city by city. I live in Southern California, and we have all kinds of different social classes here. There's a lot of homelessness and very wealthy people here. And there's a lot of corporations. I think we're considered a blue state, but there's also a lot of privilege. Politics have just gotten so polarizing. We're not even just disagreeing anymore. We're actually dehumanizing each other. And for me, I have friends in all capacities. I have never been attracted to just one type of person or one type of social class. I incorporate into my life people who I don't agree with politically, spiritually, and by the way, who do not agree with me. And I think that's beautiful. That is a tapestry of the humans that God has created. And it has enriched my life and given me so much perspective and compassion for how I want to live my life and for the people who I'm sharing this space on earth with. But to get to that point, I had to confront how much I was also internally dehumanizing people. So if that person voted for that person, they're clearly an idiot. If this person voted for that person, they're clearly a great person, right? And neither of those things are true, not even remotely true. I'm somebody who has grown up idealizing social justice advocates and those who volunteer to help the underprivileged and people on the fringes of society. Those are the people who I've always grown to admire and the people who I wanted to be like as well. And I'll talk about why that's not a great idea necessarily in another video. And I'm not saying that's not, don't do it, but I'm just going to let you know the other side of that. But all of that to say that, I grew up very much enamored with this idea that there can be justice for everybody, right? And we can't all live in this very Pollyanna utopia world. The reality is that that's just not going to happen. We're not always going to believe the same thing, and that's fine. We don't have to, and we shouldn't. And that has helped spur the compassion and faith that I have. Working with so many people in sobriety, people who the big book says would not normally mix, right? I don't know that I would have ever befriended a user who would sleep in bushes before. And I'm not sure that that attorney from that very wealthy part of San Diego would have associated with a 3-time DUI drunk. It's very funny to think about how alike we actually are when we have all these labels that create division between us, even just in a neighborhood. And it's difficult in a very vulnerable idea to think about, well, maybe I can consider that person who I don't agree with politically as a human. It's easy to dehumanize other people. And it makes nuance feel very dangerous because we almost feel like we're giving in. And if everyone's angry and triggered, everyone begins to believe their side is the only correct one. If you really think about that, it's because we feel like we're in danger. We're all operating off of fear. I'm not saying anything that hasn't been said before, but from a spiritual way of walking through life, it's important that we look at that if we want to be spiritually mature and continue to grow, especially if you're like me and your sobriety relies on it. And the reality is that I'm connected to communities that are very much harmed by what even current politics are doing and that have probably been harmed by other people in office previously. We like to think that it is some faraway White House on the other side of the country, but the decisions being made in that White House are very much impacting the people in the communities I'm close to. For example, people who are recovering and who are just getting back on their feet and they're trying to stay sober, and they are on SNAP benefits, right? And now they're wondering if they're not even going to be able to eat. And it's like that should be just such a fundamental right for every human being to be able to eat, regardless of anything. If we look at Jesus, I don't think Jesus was doing drugs and trying to morally say who should and shouldn't eat. This was just a fundamental right that everybody should have. He even broke 2 loaves and 2 fish and tried to feed everybody that he could with that. And yet, here we're legislating the ability for nourishment. And then we say that we're a very advanced society. And it's like, are we though? And we're kind of treating people as if some people deserve to eat and others don't. And so it's complicated for me because I can see these decisions being made and how they're impacting people close to me. And it's really easy for me to go into this fight or flight. Well, like, what kind of good moral person would make a decision that would impact so many people like that? And on the other hand, it's like, wow, what kind of person does that? You cannot be feeling good about yourself. You cannot be feeling good about the world if you feel like you have to be stepping on people all the time. Even just on a small scale within my life, when I was in my alcoholism, the way that I was hurting people, that was all a way to just keep people away from me, to protect myself, to make sure that nobody could really see me. It was just all a defense, right? I was just trying to keep myself safe, even if nobody was attacking me. It was so delusional. It's really tempting to write off people with certain political views or just political views who do not align with my personal spiritual convictions just because I see them as harmful. And it's easy to write them off as a whole. That's where the real spiritual challenge begins. Actually, I don't want to be that person writing off people like that. The reality is, I need that person. And whether or not they know it, they in some way also need me. They need the people who don't believe the way that they believe. And I need people who do not believe the way that I believe. And this isn't about being some kumbaya optimist, Pollyanna, rose colored glasses, okay? This is about survival in the long term. We cannot build a world that is sustainable for everyone if we will not even talk. There will always be separation of classes and there will always be separation of some sort. I'm fully aware of that. But there needs to be, we need to reintroduce humanity to each other and within each other. I'm actively being loving to people who I know I don't agree with. And I will sometimes read their posts and I will just be like, that is just one sliver of who this person is. And I know that for a fact. Is being rigid about these political or even spiritual ideas, it's rigidity still. It's that very much black and white thinking. There is no gray area. There is no mystery in that, essentially. And when that happens, that's like a spiritual relapse. When I begin to think in black and white in my own personal life, I am setting myself up for a relapse. When I'm spiritually judging other people and how they decide to vote and protest or talk about other groups of people, if I immediately write them off as terrible people or they're going to hell, that is a spiritual relapse. That is me going back into my black and white thinking, wrong or right thinking. And by the way, nobody put me in charge of judging people. I checked in with God, it's still not in the Bible that I'm allowed to do that. And actually, if I continue to just segment myself from other people and say, people who believe in this certain way, they are like the other people, and just othering people in this way that keeps me separated from them, That's a spiritual relapse. That's keeping me separated from God's children, from people who I was meant to interact with on this earth at the same time, who is existing on this earth at the exact same time as me. And it keeps me asleep in the long term, right? Because if I'm cutting people off in that way, I'm not getting to learn about their experience. I'm not getting to learn from them. And also, they're not getting to learn from me. And this isn't in a way to change people's minds. It's just to be there for them. It's just to really see them as who they are. And that is still, as a child of God, I need to remain aware of that. And listen, I am as guilty of this as anybody else, but demonizing people is just a very cheap high. It's very much like doing drugs. Hatred is such a powerful emotion, and just being like, yeah, it feels good for a second, and then that rush goes away, and you're just kind of left feeling very hollow. And overall, what I've learned is that most people are not evil. They are scared, misinformed, overwhelmed, and shaped by different life experiences than I've had. More often than not, they're consuming different media than I'm consuming. And ultimately, other people's political beliefs are just a segment of who they are. And it does not accurately reflect the fullness of any one person. So, this new challenge of integrating and accepting people who don't believe what I believe is the new challenge. And it is something that we should all be working towards now. There is no longer a good or bad, a left or right, correct or wrong. If we accept people, it means that their ideas are not harmless, because there are very harmful ideas out there. But even more harmful is shutting everybody out. It is worse to have horrible things going on and just not be engaged with it. And if there's somebody out there causing harm, don't you want to be around to possibly be a loving and compassionate voice of reason, or just that listening ear to be like, what is going on? Why do you think oppression is going to make you better? Why do you think that people are trying to take things from you? Why do you feel like whatever it is? Why is hate your default? Hate, I think, is very close to anger, and anger is just like a secondary emotion. There's something else beneath that. A lot of that is sadness. A lot of that is loss or abandonment, or even just fear, right? So, integrating and accepting people, regardless of their beliefs, not because their beliefs aren't harmful, but because shutting them out makes everything else worse. And we have to begin to see our lives in this way, and the way that we interact with other people in person and on the internet. This is really, everybody I feel is guilty of, even if they're not participating in the hate comments. People share, I've done this where I'm sharing things and giving my opinion on it as if I am the last stop of moral judgment. It's exhausting. That's not my role to play on this earth. But I'm trying to be a spiritual adult here, spiritually mature. And that must include accepting and loving people who are not like me. This means I need to learn how to hold boundaries without being hateful. I need to be able to speak honestly and truthfully without having any contempt or sense of condemnation. I really have to continue to stay curious, just staying open to this wonder how things are panning out in this world, instead of reverting into self righteousness. And I need to be able to see the human before the ideology. And I feel like the sooner that we can all begin to understand that living in community with anybody, even if you're in a relationship, there will always be conflict and tension. And these are not negative things. The way that we handle them can be negative. Those are the actual harmful things. These are normal parts of being in community with other humans. We will never be uniform. We were not created for that. We were not all supposed to be homogenized humans, all believing and doing the exact same thing. That is ridiculous. God is way too imaginative and creative for that. He's created us so beautifully and uniquely. And what are we doing with it? So, overall, all that I'm saying, I cannot be a compassionate person if I'm going to shut down at every inkling of conflict or disagreement. I need to really invite God into the tension. And this is what we should be doing as a country too, inviting God into the tension. our wisdom will continue to grow in this discomfort, and we'll be able to metabolize something new. And healing requires quite a bit of diversity and creativity and problem solving, even if it's the kind that some of us dislike. So, all of this to say that I really do feel that the next wave of being awakened is going to be realizing that we need to see the human before the ideology. This is going to be necessary for our survival as a human species and as spiritual people here on this earth. If we want a better country, we cannot keep disappearing into our ideological corners. We have to be able to look at each other in the eyes again and hold compassion for each other. So that's just what I've been wondering about lately. And I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Do you think it's possible? Do you practice this in your own life? Are you spiritually mature already? Do you have any tips for me? I hope that you all have an amazing day, and I love you so much. And if you're not subscribed yet, please do and comment. Thanks.